There are women who are born to serve their country, and there are women who are born to devour it. Delcy Rodriguez is one of the latter. Her RGC, some GC, looks like that of a respectable stateswoman, lawyer, chancellor, minister of communication, minister of petroleum, vice president of the Republic, president of the National Constituent Assembly, an impeccable career on paper, the dream of any politician with ambitions. But there's another resume, the one that doesn't appear in official biographies, the one written in reports from the U.S. Department of the Treasury, which sanctioned her for human rights violations, the one that links her to 40 suitcases that landed in Madrid loaded with mystery, the one that connects her name to 104 Venezuelan gold ingots that disappeared in the night, the one that points to her, according to a Chavista general imprisoned in the United States, as one of the Machiavellian brains of the Cartel of the Suns, the first female president of Venezuela. That's what Delcy Rodriguez is today as I record this video. She didn't come to power through elections. She arrived because the man who put her as vice president was taken out of his country, handcuffed by U.S. troops. But that's not the most disturbing part of this story. The most disturbing is the mansion. In the 8th transversal of Los Palos Grandes in the northeast of Caracas, there exists a property that the neighbors know by a single name, Delcy's house. Where there used to be a tropical oasis created by a German botanist, today there's a gray wall where orchids and bamboos once flourished. Today there's a module of the General Directorate of Military Counterintelligence guarding who passes through the block. Why does a private house have custody from military counterintelligence? Why is the property in the name of a lower middle-class woman who lives 40 minutes from Caracas? Why did that woman's boyfriend turn up dead in the General Cemetery of the South 3 weeks after she bought the land, with the body so decomposed that they had to identify him by DNA? His name was Edward Velázquez. He was 40 years old. He was a government contractor. He had just collected $1 million in cash from the National Development Fund. 3 weeks later, he was dead. The money never appeared. His truck was found burned, and the construction of the mansion didn't stop for a single day. Venezuelan investigative journalism has been asking the questions that no one wants to answer for years. Armando.info documented every detail, the rushed purchase, the immediate demolition, the unsolved murder, the counterintelligence guarding a private property as if it were a presidential bunker. How is it possible? How did a woman sanctioned by the United States, the European Union, Canada, and Switzerland end up governing Venezuela? How did an official pointed out as the brain of a drug trafficking network by a general who served 34 years in the Venezuelan army end up dispatching from Miraflores today? How did the girl who saw her father die tortured in a secret police dungeon become the most powerful woman in a country where opponents are tortured? The answer has to do with revenge, with power, with blood, and with a phrase that Delcy Rodriguez uttered in 2018 that explains everything that came after. The Bolivarian Revolution was our personal revenge. Before continuing, I need to ask you something. What you're about to hear connects the Venezuelan power elite with networks of corruption, frontmen, and unsolved deaths. These aren't rumors. They're documented journalistic investigations, judicial files, testimonies from generals who decided to speak. This story bothers many governments. That's why the algorithm buries it. If you believe these truths deserve to come to light, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Your click is the only thing that can break the silence. To understand how Delcy Rodriguez became the most powerful woman in Venezuela, we have to start from the beginning. We have to go to a Dissip dungeon in 1976. We have to meet a father who didn't die of natural causes. He died with his liver burst and 7 broken ribs. Jorge Antonio Rodriguez was born in Carora, Lara State on February 16, 1942. Son of peasants, normal school teacher, literacy teacher in the barrios of Barquisimeto, a man who believed that the only way to change Venezuela was to destroy it first, to build it later. In the 1960s, while the country was living the oil boom and the young democracy of Virgímulo Betancur, Jorge Antonio chose another path. He joined the revolutionary left movement, embraced Marxism-Leninism, founded the Socialist League, became a guerrilla. For him, Venezuela was a colony of U.S. imperialism and had to be fought with arms. On December 26, 1962, he married Delcy Guigimez in the San Juan Church in Barquisimeto. From that union, 2 children would be born, Jorge Jesus in 1965 and Delcy Eloína in 1969. But Jorge Antonio wouldn't be a common father. He was a revolutionary, and revolutionaries have more important missions than changing diapers. On February 27, 1976, a command of 7 armed men entered the Quinta Bichiro in the Prados del Este urbanization in Caracas. Inside was William Frank Niehaus, a 45-year-old American businessman, vice president of Owens, Illinois, in Venezuela. They drugged him, took him out in the presence of his wife and 3 children, and disappeared. The group that claimed the kidnapping called itself the Revolutionary Command Argemiro Gabaldgin. They demanded $3.5 million, the distribution of food to the poor, and the publication of a manifesto in international newspapers. But there was another reason for the radical Venezuelan left. William Niehaus wasn't just a glass businessman, he was a CIA agent. He had relations with the U.S. Ambassador Harry Schlaudeman, and according to the guerrillas, he had participated in the coup against Salvador Allende in Chile 3 years earlier. Niehaus deserved to die, or at least that's what his captors believed. Jorge Antonio Rodriguez was the general secretary of the Socialist League and was linked to the kidnapping. 5 months later, on July 23, 1976, the Directorate of Intelligence and Prevention Services arrested him. What happened in the following 2 days was recorded in the autopsy protocol. On July 25th, Jorge Antonio Rodriguez appeared dead in his cell. He was 34 years old. The official version was a heart attack, but when the forensic doctors examined the body, they found something else. 7 fractured ribs, burst liver, massive internal hemorrhages, cigarette burns on the skin, marks from electric shocks, thoraco-abdominal contusions that could only be explained one way. They had beaten him to death. It wasn't a heart attack. It was an execution. The scandal shook Venezuela. The Attorney General denounced the crime. The DICIP director, Aristides Blandin, was dismissed. Several officials were prosecuted for torture and homicide. 3 policemen ended up convicted. On July 27th, 1976, the main auditorium of the Central University of Venezuela was dressed in mourning. Thousands of people accompanied the coffin to the General Cemetery of the South, and in the front row, 2 orphan children, Jorge, 11 years old, and Delcy, 7. The little Jorge went up to the podium and read a poem in honor of his father at 11 years old in front of thousands of people in front of the corpse of the man who had been tortured to death. That day, something broke inside those children, or perhaps something ignited. The mother, Delcy Guigimez, took charge of keeping the flame alive. She spoke to them about the martyr father. She spoke to them about the killers who were still free. She spoke to them about revenge. The Bolivarian Revolution, the arrival of Commander Hugo Chávez, was our personal revenge, Delcy Rodriguez would confess 42 years later in 2018. William Niehaus, the kidnapped businessman, remained in captivity for 3 years, 4 months, and 2 days. He was found by chance on June 29, 1979, chained in a cabin near Ciudad Bolívar when the police were looking for cattle thieves. He survived. Jorge Antonio Rodriguez did not, and his children would spend the rest of their lives collecting that debt. Delcy Rodriguez didn't inherit just her father's last name. She inherited the rage. She studied law at the Central University of Venezuela, the same university where they held the wake for Jorge Antonio Rodriguez's body, the same main auditorium where her 11-year-old brother read a poem in front of the coffin. I made a decision to do justice in my dad's case and entered the law school, she would confess years later. But Caracas became too small for her. After graduating, she traveled to Paris. She studied social law at the University of Paris-Nanterre. Then she crossed the English Channel and completed a master's in social policy at Birkbeck University in London. Almost a decade outside Venezuela, learning, waiting, preparing. When Hugo Chávez came to power in 1999, the Rodriguez siblings saw the opportunity they had waited for all their lives. Revenge had a vehicle. It was called the Bolivarian Revolution. In 2002, after the brief coup against Chávez, Delcy returned definitively to Caracas. Chancellor Roy Chatterton offered her to join his team. From 7 in the morning to 7 at night, she worked as a political assistant in the Yellow House, headquarters of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. From 7 at night onward, she collaborated as an assistant to the Minister of Communication in the Miraflores Palace. 14 hours a day, every day, building power from the shadows. In 2003, her first official position arrived, General Coordinator of the Vice Presidency of the Republic. That same year, her brother Jorge was appointed President of the National Electoral Council, the body that controls elections in Venezuela. The irony was brutal. The children of the tortured guerrilla now pulled the strings of the state that had killed their father. In 2005, Delcy rose to Vice Minister for European Affairs. In February 2006, she made the jump, Minister of the Presidential Office. She had direct access to Hugo Chavez. She dispatched from Miraflores. At 36 years old, the orphan girl from Caracas was a hallway away from the most powerful man in Venezuela, but the relationship with Chávez wasn't easy. According to journalist Ibejiu Ioi Ellis Pacheco, author of the book The Sinister Siblings, Delcy hated the military and Chávez was above all a military man. On a presidential flight, after a confrontation, the commander gave a direct order. As soon as we touch ground, this lady doesn't continue in the entourage. Delcy was taken off the plane almost without luggage, and Chávez prohibited her entry to official bodies until the day of his death. 6 years in the desert, but the Rodriguezes know how to wait and know whom to bet on. When Chávez died in March 2013, Nicolás Maduro inherited the throne, and Maduro needed allies who weren't military. He needed political operators. He needed someone who knew the corridors of power and owed everything to him. Delcy Rodriguez was perfect. In August 2013, Maduro rescued her from ostracism and appointed her Minister of Communication and Information. The return was triumphant. In December 2014, another promotion, Chancellor of the Republic, the first woman to hold that position in Venezuela's history. For 3 years, Delcy was the international face of Chavismo. She traveled to Russia, China, Iran, Turkey. She defended the regime in the OAS and the UN. She executed Venezuela's withdrawal from the Organization of American States. She confronted governments, journalists, international organizations. Maduro baptized her with a nickname that would stick forever, the Tigress. A young brave woman, seasoned, daughter of a martyr, revolutionary, and proven in 1,000 battles, he said, when he named her vice president in June 2018. Executive Vice President of Venezuela, number 2 in power. To that position, she added over the years the portfolios of economy and finance, and in August 2024, the Ministry of Hydrocarbons, Petroleum, the real power in Venezuela. But the ascent had a price. The United States sanctioned her in September 2018 for corruption and human rights violations. The European Union prohibited her from setting foot in Schengen territory. Canada, Switzerland, and Mexico froze her assets and closed their doors to her. Delcy Rodriguez became an international pariah, but within Venezuela, she was untouchable. She controlled the economy, she controlled petroleum, she indirectly controlled the Bolivarian intelligence service. And together with her brother Jorge, president of the National Assembly, she formed the hardcore of Chavista power. 2 orphan siblings who had sworn revenge now controlled the 2 most important powers of the state, the executive and the legislative. But power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. In January 2020, Delcy Rodriguez made a mistake that would haunt her forever. She landed in Madrid with 40 suitcases. In the early morning of January 20th, 2020, a private plane with Turkish registration landed at Adolfo Suarez Madrid Barajas Airport. On board was Delcy Rodriguez, the same woman who had been prohibited from setting foot in European territory since 2018. The same woman sanctioned by the European Union for human rights violations. The same woman who couldn't enter the Schengen area under any circumstances. But someone was waiting for her. José Luis Ábalos, Spain's Minister of Transport and Organization Secretary of the Socialist Party. Beside him, his advisor, Koldo Garcia, and with them a businessman named Victor de Aldama, who years later would end up imprisoned for corruption. 3 men waiting in the early morning for a woman who couldn't be there. What was Delcy Rodriguez carrying on that plane? According to witnesses, 40 suitcases. 40 suitcases that weren't checked by any security control. 40 suitcases that were unloaded from the plane by order of Koldo Garcia. 40 suitcases whose contents remain an official mystery. But the Central Operational Unit of the Spanish Civil Guard found something 4 years later. In October 2024, during the investigation of the so-called Koldo case, UCO agents seized Victor de Aldama's laptop and inside found a photograph that changed everything. A sales contract, 104 gold ingots, 68,400, likely a weight or value but incomplete in original, 8,254 similarly. The seller, the National Development Fund of Venezuela. The buyer, a Spanish company called Bancasa. The contract date, December 27th, 2019, 24 days before Delcy landed in Madrid. The UCO also found conversations between Aldama and Delcy Rodriguez about highly sensitive matters. Encrypted messages, calls, coordination for the transfer of gold from Moscow to Caracas, passing through Zambia, camouflaged as sanitary material, and a detail that demolished the official version of the Spanish government. 4 days before the trip on January 16, 2020, Gigi Gibalos sent a WhatsApp message to President Pedro Escúnchez. The UCO recovered it from the minister's phone. the message said, and to finish bothering you, the Vice President of Venezuela is coming privately on Monday and wants to see me discreetly as a continuation of the meeting I had with the Minister of Communication, who is her brother. As Gunchez responded with a single word, good. The president of Spain knew and authorized the visit. What did Delcy and the Spaniards talk about that early morning in Barajas? According to sources from the investigation, about three main topics. First, that Spain not receive Juan Guaidó, the Venezuelan opposition leader who would arrive in Madrid just one day later. Escunchez was the only EU leader who didn't meet with him. Second, the regime's displeasure over the presence of Leopoldo Lopez, a refugee in the Spanish embassy in Caracas. Third, the interests of the oil company Repsol in Venezuela and its future operations. According to witnesses, Delcy Rodriguez spoke on the phone with Pedro Escunchez from the plane. She warned him, "We had an agreement." What agreement? That was never clarified. What is known is that the scandal, baptized as Delcygate, ended up judicially archived. The Supreme Court of Spain determined that Delcy Rodriguez effectively set foot on Spanish territory, violating European sanctions, but that Gigi Gebelos had no criminal responsibility. The security camera recordings from the airport were sealed. They will remain stored until 2035. Gebelos was expelled from the government in 2021. In 2024, he was expelled from the PSOE parliamentary group. Today, he is being prosecuted for corruption. Koldo Garcia is being investigated by the National Court. Vigi Quitor de Aldama was arrested in August 2024. He has declared that Gunchez knew everything and that Delcy's suitcases contained money that stayed in Spain. And Delcy Rodriguez continued ascending because in Venezuela, corruption doesn't sink you. It elevates you. And those 40 suitcases that landed in Madrid that January early morning are just a fraction of the fortune that Delcy Rodriguez has accumulated on her path to power, a fortune that has a name and surname. There's a question that no one in Venezuela can answer without risking their life. Where did Youssef Abou Nassif Smaili's fortune come from? He's 36 years old, Venezuelan of Lebanese origin, and since 2017, he's the sentimental partner of Delcy Rodriguez. There's no record of marriage or common children, but there's something more important than a marriage certificate. There are contracts, many contracts. According to the investigation by the portal Armando.info, the Abou Nassif clan accumulated at least $413 million in agreements with the Venezuelan state between 2017 and 2018, just when his relationship with Delcy began. Just when she was chancellor and her power started to grow. Coincidence? In Venezuela, there are no coincidences. There are favors. The main business was the CLAPS, the Local Committees for Supply and Production, a program created in 2016 to distribute subsidized food to poor families. In theory, a social plan. In practice, a corruption machine. The same scheme that enriched Alex Saab, Nicolas Maduro's Colombian frontman, today extradited to the United States. The Abou Nassifs entered that feast through the big door. He represented M. Asjoy Industries Limited, a company registered in Hong Kong. His brother Omar managed Million Rise Industries Limited, also in Hong Kong. They also had Lock Fortune Trading Limited and Chining Capital International Limited. 4 companies in a tax haven, all suppliers to the CLAPS, all connected to Corpoex, the state company in charge of centralizing public imports, overprices, low-quality food, products that never reached the population. In Mexico, the Financial Intelligence Unit blocked accounts linked to these companies after detecting irregularities. But in Venezuela, the businesses continued growing. In 2019, the Abou Nassif clan signed another contract with Corpoex, this time for 145 million euros. The product, hemodialysis kits for the Venezuelan Institute of Social Security, medical kits, in a country where hospitals don't even have gauze or syringes. And while Venezuelans queued for hours to get a package of flour, the Abou Nassif brothers opened luxury bodegas. In February 2019, Nabil Abou Nassif, another clan member who had been finance director of the Caracas mayor's office during Jorge Rodriguez's management, registered a company called Oakmart. In the midst of the pandemic, Oakmart opened 3 locations in Caracas, one of them on the ground floor of the Los Andes building in Sabana Grande, the same building that Hugo Chavez ordered expropriated to turn it into student housing, the same building that later housed COVID patients. Today, that building expropriated from the Venezuelan people has a bodega of imported products where a 2-liter soda costs, price incomplete in original, and a package of powdered milk, almost 8. Similarly, according to estimates from local media, Oakmart moves close to $500 million a year. And according to the Spanish newspaper El Debate, Youssef Abou Nassif Smaili's personal fortune amounts to 500 million euros. 500 million euros, in a country where the minimum wage doesn't reach dollars, amount incomplete, per month. The journalist Roberto Denis from Armando.info has documented every step, companies and contracts. Today, he lives in exile because in Venezuela, telling the truth has a price. And Youssef Abu Nassif isn't just a lucky businessman. He's the man who was sitting next to Delcy Rodriguez on that plane that landed in Madrid with 40 suitcases. He's the man who accompanies her in every decision. He's the man who today, with Delcy in the presidency, has become Venezuela's first gentleman, a first gentleman whose fortune is being tracked by Switzerland, the United States, and the DEA, a first gentleman who represents everything that Chavismo promised to destroy and ended up multiplying. The oligarchy, the looting, the obscenity of wealth over others' misery. Because while 7 million Venezuelans fled the country seeking food, Youssef Abu Nassif opened luxury supermarkets. While children died in hospitals without medicines, he signed contracts for hemodialysis kits. While the people ate from the garbage, he and Delcy flew in private jets loaded with suitcases. This is the Venezuela of the Rodriguez siblings. This is the Bolivarian Revolution. And this woman, the one who governs from Miraflores today, the one who came to power promising to avenge her father's death, has a story that was about to close. Because the girl who saw her father die tortured in 1976 has already fulfilled her revenge. January 5th, 2026. The National Assembly of Venezuela opens a new session, but this isn't just any session, it's the coronation of a dynasty. On the stage, Jorge Rodriguez Gomez, president of the parliament for the 6th consecutive year. In front of him, his younger sister. I come as executive vice president of the constitutional president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro Moros, to take the oath. Delcy Eloina Rodriguez Gomez, 56 years old, becomes the first woman to occupy the presidency of Venezuela. Not by popular election, not by the will of the people, by order of the Supreme Court of Justice controlled by Chavismo, which interpreted Maduro's capture as a temporary absence to avoid calling elections. The brother swears her in, the sister swears, and both now control the two most important powers of the state, the executive and the legislative. I come with pain, said Delcy, before the officialist deputies who chanted, Vamos, Nico. I come with pain for the kidnapping of two heroes we have as hostages in the United States. The heroes were Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores, captured by U.S. troops just 48 hours earlier in a military operation over Caracas. But there was another present in that session who deserved attention. Nicolas Maduro Guerra, the son of the captured dictator, the one some call Nicolasito, the one who spoke to offer Delcy his hand and his support and assure that the homeland is in good hands. The homeland in good hands. In whose hands? Delcy Rodriguez's first decision as president was a clear signal of what was to come. She dismissed Major General Javier Marcano Tabata, commander of the Presidential Honor Guard, the man who couldn't prevent Maduro's capture, and in his place named General Gustavo González López. Who is González López? The man who directed the SIBIN, the Bolivarian National Intelligence Service, for years, the jailer of El Helicoide, the most feared torture center in Caracas, responsible for what the UN documented as arbitrary detentions, forced disappearances, tortures, and cruel treatments against political opponents. Sanctioned by the United States since 2015, sanctioned by Canada, Switzerland, Panama, and the European Union, investigated by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity, this is the man Delcy Rodriguez chose to protect her, a torturer to care for the daughter of a tortured man. The irony would be poetic if it weren't tragic. On the first day of her government, while promising peace and stability, two men aged 64 and 65 were arrested in Mérida. Their crime, seeming too happy after Maduro's capture, application of the decree of external commotion. Maria Corina Machado, the opposition leader and 2025 Nobel Peace Prize winner, did not recognize the interim. Everyone, both in Venezuela and abroad, knows her perfectly and the role she has played, declared Machado. She has been one of the main architects and directors of the repression centers, because the UN had already concluded in 2020 that there were reasonable grounds to believe that Delcy Rodriguez knew or should have known about the crimes committed by SIBIN officials under her supervision, arbitrary detentions, tortures, sexual violence, and did nothing to prevent them. Donald Trump, the same one who ordered Maduro's capture, said he was in conversations with her, that she was kind, that she would do everything the United States asks, and then warned if she doesn't do what she should, she's going to pay a very big price, probably bigger than Maduro. Delcy responded by offering an agenda of cooperation. The Tigress, the one who roared against imperialism, now negotiated with it. But while the world watches the diplomatic maneuvers, there's something no one can ignore. 50 years after Jorge Antonio Rodriguez's death, his two children control Venezuela. The boy who read a poem at his father's wake now presides over the parliament. The 7-year-old girl who swore revenge now governs from Miraflores, and the Bolivarian Revolution, the one that promised to liberate the people, ended up converted into the family business of a single family. July 25, 1976. A 34-year-old man dies in a disip cell with fractured ribs and a burst liver. His daughter is 7 years old. January 5, 2026, that girl turned into a 56-year-old woman swears in as president of Venezuela in front of her brother. 50 years separate both dates, 50 years to complete a revenge. But there's something no one says out loud. Whom did the Rodriguez siblings really avenge themselves against? Their father was tortured by the political police of a democratic government. He died denouncing imperialism. He died believing in the revolution, and his children inherited that hatred. But they turned it into something else. They turned it into power, they turned it into money, they turned it into exactly what their father fought against. Because today, while Delcy Rodriguez governs Venezuela, almost 8 million Venezuelans have fled the country. The largest migratory crisis in the history of the Western Hemisphere. Doctors driving taxis in Lima, engineers cleaning floors in Madrid, lawyers selling empanadas in Bogotá. 86.9% of the population lives in poverty. More than 20 million people without adequate access to food and medicines. 5 million Venezuelans face hunger. And meanwhile, the president's boyfriend accumulates 500 million euros in contracts with the state. Meanwhile, the 40 suitcases that landed in Madrid remain a mystery. Meanwhile, the Rodriguez siblings control the executive and legislative branches of a destroyed nation. Jorge Antonio Rodriguez died for his ideas. He died believing a better world was possible. He died tortured for defending the poor. What would he think today if he saw his children? What would he think seeing Delcy negotiating with Donald Trump, the same type of imperialist he fought? What would he think seeing Jorge presiding over a parliament that approves everything power orders? What would he think knowing his children supervise torture centers like El Helicoide, where the UN has documented the same horrors he suffered? What would he think seeing that the Bolivarian Revolution became a family's business? The Rodriguez's revenge wasn't against those who killed their father. It was against Venezuela because the entire country paid the price of their hatred. 7 million exiles paid, political prisoners paid, children who die in hospitals without medicines paid, the elderly who collect pensions that don't even cover a carton of eggs paid. Everyone paid so that two siblings could sit on the throne their father never had. Delcy Rodriguez once said, "The Bolivarian Revolution was our personal revenge." She was right. It was personal. It was theirs. And the Venezuelan people were the collateral damage. Today, as we record this video, Delcy Rodriguez is still in Miraflores. The torturer general she chose to protect her is still by her side. Her brother still controls the parliament. Her boyfriend still accumulates contracts, and almost 8 million Venezuelans still wait to be able to return home. This is the story of a girl who saw her father die, a girl who swore revenge, a girl who fulfilled her promise, and a country that paid the price. Because in Venezuela, tragedy never ends, it just changes owners. If you made it this far, you now know who Delcy Rodriguez is. Now the question is different. How much more will Venezuela have to pay for a family's revenge? Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this story. Because this hasn't ended, it's just beginning. 938 RJSGJ.